It was not an easy decision. I struggled with it, to be honest. It was last summer, that I actually was looking at it. I had no plans to run. As you know, I have my home in Tufton Borough, and I did go to Florida in the winter, so I was a snowbird, and I had a real estate license down there, so I actually had the residency in Florida, but I always spent 4 or 5 months up here, sometimes 6, but it was basically a snowbird for the last 8 years or so after I left office. And but people started talking to me and asking me to consider it. There was no Scott Brown on the scene at that time, at least not in any serious way that I was aware of. And the people just say, you ought to do it, you ought to do it, you ought to do it. And then I said no, and then I thought about it again and talked to some more people, talked to my family, and decided that I felt like I wanted to serve again. I didn't feel there was any age limit on patriotism and belief in what, the beliefs that you have. I came up here in 2012 and worked with the Gingrich for President campaign for a few weeks, which, as you know, the primary was really early that year. And, people treated me, I had a lot of, I was treated, I thought, with an extraordinary amount of respect by people, not only activists, but many members of the media. They were very, very friendly and polite, and I just felt good about it. And so when I got back here and I started looking at the situation, and in terms of my own beliefs, I don't feel our country's headed in the right direction. I felt like I had a lot to offer. I hoped that I could unite perhaps the conservative side of the party and bring in others as well, and perhaps win an election and make a difference. And that's really the only reason to come back, is to try to make a difference. I feel that I can do that. I have a lot of experience, as you know, and that experience is helpful when you get there, because there's a lot to learn. There's a big learning curve. And I'm not against people having a learning curve. We all have to do it with reporters, editors, politicians. We all start somewhere. But I think when you have a chance to, where your country is kind of in crisis, if you will, you have a chance to use that experience to your advantage and to help the people of the state. Not in a sense of bringing more money to the state or things like that, but rather just knowing how to operate, knowing the rules of the Senate. One thing about age is you can look and sometimes see problems coming a little better than those young people who make those mistakes that we wish they wouldn't make, like your kids. But so I just felt really good about it. I just felt like I even feel more confident now than I did when I served before. I just feel better about it. Maybe it's because I'm a grandfather and have a different outlook on life, but I don't have any animosity toward those who disagree with me whatsoever. I respect that. I just feel that the campaign should be about the issues that you believe in strongly. Take those out there and let the people make the decision. And there's no dislike for Jeanne Shaheen. I like Jeanne Shaheen personally. I always have. She and I have a good relationship personally. But I just feel like that she's wrong on the issues, and I'm sure she feels I'm wrong. So hopefully we'll have a chance to debate each other. That's pretty much it. No big, no big master plan or anything like that.
We've got a bunch of questions lined up for you.
Yeah, we got all the time.
That's right.
I owe you some time, and I'll give you all you want. So no problem.
Bill takes note in an editorial in our paper today that Congress has passed no significant gun control measure since 1993, more than 2 decades. I have a 2-part question for you. Does that surprise you that there's been no meaningful reform, and is that okay with you? That's the first part. Number 2, can you imagine yourself any legislative response or common sense approaches to making people's lives, or making people safer without infringing on gun owners' rights?
I'm frankly pleased if there hasn't been any gun control restriction passed, because I think you all know my position on the Second Amendment. It's pretty strong. It's as strong as you can be. I had an A+ rating with both the Gun Owners of America and the NRA for 18 years in the Congress. I don't subscribe to the theory that applying, putting restrictions on law-abiding citizens is a way to make your country safer. I think we need to deal with those who violate the law, not those who subscribe to the law and obey the law. So if there has not been any additional gun control legislation passed, I'd be pleased with that. I fought a lot of it for 18 years. These tragedies that occur are just that. They're tragedies. They're horrible. You can name them all. I remember being involved in a debate against gun control after Columbine. That was not particularly a fun time, and we've had a lot more since, and bad ones. But these are people who are really sick. They're people who do terrible things, and I don't believe that the rest of society should pay a price. Law-abiding society pay a price for what people do that have evil intentions, or perhaps they're mentally ill, or whatever the situation may be. We can deal with those issues in a separate way, but not to put restrictions on law-abiding people who have a Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms.
So how would you address if it's not on the gun ownership or gun carrying rights? How would you address these people that are doing these things?
Well, I mean, these are people who are doing terrible things, but they get a lot. Those terrible crimes get a lot of very specific attention. Mm-hmm. There are 40,000 people killed with automobiles every year. There are people killed with knives. There are people who are killed with poison. There are people who commit suicide. There are crimes of passion. I mean, there are all kinds of crimes that kill people. That happens, unfortunately, in a free society, and sometimes we're victims of it, and sometimes, fortunately, we're not. But I don't see the relationship between singling out a firearm and making that the culprit. It's not the firearm, you've heard it all before, but it's the person behind it, not the firearm. I mean, we're not going to restrict cars, even though cars kill people. We're not going to restrict kitchen knives, and they can be. I mean, probably more people have been killed with a knife than a gun, but I haven't done the research on that. May not be accurate, but I just don't see the connection to terrible crimes are terrible crimes. They're committed by people, and a gun is an instrument, as a knife is, or anything else that can be used to kill someone. Your hands can be used. Look at what the terrorists did. They killed thousands with a box cutter, essentially. That's how it started. Yeah. So I think, and that was a terrible crime. 3,000 people died in 2 plane crashes, and obviously more than 3 plane crashes. So I just don't see the connection there. I think it's because of the horror of the crimes and the publicity that they get, and they are horrible. It contributes to the debate to try to restrict guns. But if you look at the laws where Chicago, Washington D.C., strictest gun control probably in the country, crime is higher there than it is anywhere else. People with criminals have guns, and if they know that the populace has guns, it might be less. I mean, if you're a criminal and you want to hurt somebody, and one house's guy's armed and then that neighbor is not, if you're going to think about it, that's a pretty easy decision for the perpetrator. If they don't know, well, that's another story. But if you're in a community where guns are carried legally by law-abiding citizens, I think the chances of crimes are less, not more, and I think the statistics back that up.
What is your take on the sway of the NRA as a lobby and its effect on the political process, if any?
Well, the NRA is a strong lobby. I think if I were to pick the 3 strongest lobbying organizations when I was there, and I don't imagine it's changed, maybe it has, but would be probably the NRA, the National Association of Realtors, and probably the AIPAC, the Jewish, pro-Israel Jewish lobby, were all very, very powerful and very, very active. But I don't think the NRA, I don't have a problem with them lobbying for the rights of firearms. That's their constitutional right to do it, as any other organization can do. I don't single them out as being. They're not doing anything wrong as far as I'm concerned. The fact that they want to promote the rights of gun owners to protect their firearms for their defense, to hunt, to do whatever they choose to do with that weapon, target, shoot, not to commit crimes, obviously, but to do all the other legal things, which is what they do promote. I don't have a problem with it. I'm for it, and that's why I had the A+ rating with the gun owners.
Switching gears to immigration, in the general sense as well as how best to resolve the current crisis. When we talk about immigration, just your thoughts on it, and then the current situation with the border right now.
This is an issue that really has been demagogued, I think, by politicians on both sides of the aisle over the last 20 years, maybe more. I remember there was an immigration bill during the Reagan administration that was supposed to resolve everything. It was going to provide amnesty for those people who were here, put a bunch of money in to enforce the border, and of course the amnesty occurred and all of the borders stayed porous. But let me start with where we are now and kind of work backwards a little bit. What's happening now is really intriguing to me and bizarre. We're seeing a situation now where there's some kind of an outreach, and I don't have data to prove it. I can just look at what's happening and try to draw conclusions. I'm not on the inside of the administration, but when you see illegal aliens being approached in their country of origin and flown out of there and landing in American cities, not being stopped, there are occasions where they're stopping at the border, but let me just focus on this for a moment, where people are flown out of the country of origin and brought to the United States and then dispersed in various locations around the country without, apparently, as it may have happened here, without the knowledge of certain officials in our own state, such as the governor, or offices that normally deal with illegal immigration. These are illegal immigrants by definition. They are people who are violating the law, and yet they're being brought here in aircraft, landed in American cities, and sent out and sent to other locations in America. Now, that's not happening by accident. Somebody is manipulating that. You don't put people on, especially children, you don't put children on an airplane and send them somewhere if you're parents, unless you have a pretty good idea where they're going and that somebody's going to be there to greet them or perhaps help them. You wouldn't send your children to Disney World to meet your grandparents, their grandparents, if you weren't sure the grandparents were going to be there to meet them and take care of them. So I don't think parents would do that with the children. Now we're talking about two different groups. We're talking about children, teenagers, and then adults. So we have all three that we're talking about, but I know that you're referring to the latest stuff has been children. But something's going on here that I'm not aware of, but you can put two and two together, and that is that something is happening here that is where there is an effort to bring people into this country illegally for a reason which is maybe has to be explained by the administration, not by me. We know that there's no political asylum necessary. We're not talking about religious or political oppression or prosecution like we had with Cuba or other countries where there was such political oppression. So okay, we know there's economic we know there are economic issues that we're aware of, and we know that there's poverty, and people like to get out of poverty, of course. But to take those people and welcome them to the United States in violation of our own immigration laws is a serious matter, and that's happening. Now, let's take it down to the next notch, which is they're coming to the border, and they're being stopped at the border, but then they're allowed to be dispersed again. Not all of them, but many. And there's no attempt really to stop this. And so the bottom line is we have to say that we have to respect our laws, that these people are coming here are violating the laws, the immigration laws of the United States. So they should be returned to their country of origin.
Mhm.
Now, there are a number of ways you can do it. I mean, I'm not talking about leaving children who no water, no food, throw them on a bus or a plane and throw them, but not at all. I mean, be humane about it, take care of their humanitarian, take care of their needs immediately, and then return them to their country of origin. And if they're being shipped here without even going to a border where they're being stopped and they're crossing a border in an aircraft, then there's something going on that's sinister that I think needs to be addressed. And I don't know just what that is. It's a relationship somewhere between the administration and these countries, Honduras, Guatemala, wherever these kids and people are coming from. So in order to close the border, first of all, why is this happening? Well, because they know if they come here, they're not going to be returned. They know they have a chance to get on amnesty by basically the conduct of the administration in power right now. No one's being returned. People are being basically now encouraged to come. So if you add all that up, why not give it a shot? We know, based not by Bob Smith or by any conservative group, but the Center for Immigration Studies, which is a pretty fair-minded group. They're not exactly radical on either side. They're even saying that some of these kids and teenagers, and even kids and teenagers, have phone numbers, addresses in their pockets, and they're providing this information to the officials in the U.S., and then they're being sent to wherever this phone number or address may be. So they're basically being dispersed without the knowledge of the state officials. Those on the border, that's a little different, but it's all part of the same thing, and they're not being returned, or in many cases they can't be because they don't have the enforcement people capable to round them up and return them. So here's what you do. Well, first of all, no amnesty. Draw the line that says we're not going to accept people here illegally, so you will reduce the desire to come, because they know if they come, they're going to have to go back. So that'll limit, in my view, the amount of people who try to come here illegally. Number one. Number two, you could mobilize the Guard with the permissions of the governors on the border states. You could also increase the border patrol, and you could use electronic surveillance. I don't favor a wall. I don't like the concept of a wall. That's too much like Berlin. That's not America. But we do have to enforce our borders, and we're not. And they're almost at the point now where we don't have borders. It's not just they're porous, we don't even have them. So it's an economic issue, it's a social issue, it's a clearly illegal issue, and it's a national security issue. Who are these people? There's no identification in some cases. They're getting on airplanes with no ID. We don't know their medical background. We don't know if they're carrying diseases. We don't know if they've been examined. We don't know if they're terrorists. We don't know if they're people that are thrown out of the prisons. And who are these people? We don't know. At least I don't, and maybe somebody in the administration knows, and I don't think the ordinary American has a clue, or where they're even going and who's taking them in. So you have children, young adults, and adults who this is a part of one big package, if you will, and I think it has to be firmly dealt with. Eliminate the amnesty, eliminate the opportunity for people to come here illegally, and enforce the laws, the existing laws, and we can deal with it. Legal immigration built this country, and I'm all for it. But this illegal immigration it's going to cause us problems that are going to be beyond what we're going to be able to deal with. I mean, the stress right now in communities is incredible. I mean, how do you know? Maybe 500 people come into Keene tomorrow. Who knows? I mean, you don't know. We don't know. So I think we have a right to know, and we're not being told.
Now, you mentioned, of course, an immigration bill back during the Reagan
Yes.
administration. In your thoughts or any facts you want to put in, why do you feel it has been so long in addressing this issue, or just kind of it hasn't been firmly and properly addressed?
Well, it goes from, it varies, of course, from administration to administration. During the Reagan administration, as I recall, there was a lot of focus on this because you were seeing a gradual buildup of more and more illegal people who were in the country, and they were pushing to resolve it. And as I recall, the compromise was, okay, we'll seal the borders, and we'll put the funding necessary to enforce the borders and enforce the laws. But in return for that, we will grant amnesty to those people who are here now. That's what I think in essence happened. However, what happened was we didn't enforce the laws, so those who were here then got amnesty, and now millions more have come in and are still on the verge of amnesty. It's how do you get that amnesty? I mean, can the president do it with an executive order? Or maybe when he leaves office with the sweep of a pen? I don't know. That's a constitutional question. But we do know right now that the borders are not enforced. They're not being enforced. And so I don't know. I mean, as I said, it does transcend administrations. It goes the Bush administration as well as the Obama administration. And the Congresses in both parties have never dealt with the issue, in my view. They've never dealt with it, and they haven't yet. And the most recent bill hasn't dealt with it either in a responsible way. You can't keep throwing money at it. You have to resolve it. You have to be willing to stop the flow. You literally have to stop it. Turn people back. That's the only way to do it. I know it sounds harsh, but that's what you have to do. There is no other way. You cannot allow people to come in here without almost no resistance. It's not literally true, but almost. And then expect people to not keep trying to come, because there are areas of poverty and area. And the other thing we could do, which we have not done, which I would do if I had the power to do it, would be to implement sanctions on countries such as Mexico, where they're allowing people to get to the border. Again, we're dealing with an issue where some are flying over the border and getting in here, which is one issue. The other is those who are coming directly to the border, to the river, and crossing. But put sanctions on Mexico. They have a police force. They have a military. They have responsibilities in their own society. Make it known. They're not welcome illegally coming across the border. And therefore, if you do bring them, allow them to get to that border, then we are going to impose some kind of sanctions, economic sanctions, political, whatever it takes to get the job done. And it has been ignored by both political parties, in my view. I don't think it's been dealt with forthrightly, and that would be a high priority for me. I'm not saying one person can do it all, but certainly it would be a priority for me, because the stress on our nation in terms of the services that are going to be needed to be provided, social services, a lot of them. I mean, many of these people are receiving benefits that American citizens are not getting.
In terms of foreign policy, just wondering your current views on the Israeli-Gaza situation as well as the Russia-Ukraine matter.
Well, I think in the Russian-Ukraine matter first. I think that what I'm seeing here is first of all, Putin. You know, Putin's background is KGB. I mean, he's still stinging a little bit from the breakup of the old Soviet Empire. There's still a little bit of that in him, and I've never met Putin, but he's obviously a pretty smooth operator, and he knows that the Ukraine was always called the underbelly of the Soviet Union when it was the Soviet Union, because of the grain and the resources there, including oil, and I think this is always something that they've coveted to get back. So with that. In that parameter, within those parameters, you have the separatists in Ukraine, who are want to go back, want to be with the Russians, and so you've got this now. Those who want to be the Russian nationals who want to be part of Mother Russia, and those who are separated and want to be who are truly the Ukrainians who want their own nation. And I think that Putin is just exploiting that to the best of his ability. I think if he's not, I don't know that he's behind everything, but I think he exploits it. He uses the conflict that occurs between those who want to stay Ukrainian and those who want to go back to Mother Russia. He uses that as an excuse to work his way into the political system of the Ukraine so that hopefully he feels that he can get the Ukraine back as part of Russia. And the other part of that equation is that I think he perceives a weak president in terms of, not weak in terms of what he wants to do. You know, Obama has his plans, which I don't view Obama as a weak president. He believes what he believes, and he's trying to accomplish what he believes. I don't agree with him on most of those things, but he knows what he wants to do, and he is doing it. However, when you look at what's going on between Russia and Putin and Obama, if you watch the two of them, the body language is pretty obvious. You know, they don't like each other, and that doesn't help. Reagan and Gorbachev probably had a respect for each other that they definitely had a respect for each other that is not there between Putin and Obama. And I think Putin does not respect Obama. He feels that, I mean, Obama's taken down the missiles and he along the Western Europe, and I think he perceives Obama as weak on the issues between Russia and the United States. He believes that he believes strongly that he can take advantage of President Obama. But it is not, in my view, an American issue. It's an issue between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and that has to they're going to have to work it out. I mean, that's the way I view it. Back to the Israelis and the Hamas. I mean, this has been going on for how many centuries? Not centuries, but how many decades? And what bothers me is the way the reporting goes. That everything seems to be focused on whenever there's an Israeli mistake. I guess it was one where they took out a guy on a motorcycle with a rocket and blew up a school and killed a bunch of Palestinian kids. That's terrible, and that's collateral damage, which I hate that word because collateral damage is very personal, obviously, especially when kids are involved. But it seems like that gets the attention. What is omitted or seemed to be overlooked is the fact that with all these tunnels and all these attacks and all these bombs and missiles that have been fired, wherever, from the West Bank or wherever into Israel, Israel has a right to defend itself, and that's what they're trying to do. I don't think this is instigated by Israel. I don't see any evidence that it's been instigated by Israel. I just think it's when you have countries and individuals and organizations, whether it's PLO or whoever, that says Israel does not have a right to exist, the basic right to exist, and they continue to say it over and over again as it becomes an instrument of their foreign policy, well, that's pretty intimidating if you're sitting in a country the size of Israel in the Middle East. I think that every time they talk about a temporary truce or a peace, I'm just, it's kind of, what's that? It's, every president has tried to bring it. No one's been able to pull it off. It's going to have to be where, at some point, the Arab world is going to have to accept the fact that Israel has a right to exist. And if they don't, this is just going to continue, in my view. But I think Israel when they're being attacked, they have to respond. And unfortunately, in responses, you have the collateral damage of innocent people dying. But it doesn't seem to me that the press accurately reports enough, let's put it that way, the other side of it when Israelis are innocent Israelis are killed, not just soldiers, by the attacks from the Hamas.